So, what actually separates a competent school administrator from a truly transformational leader? Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're bringing together everything we've learned to really nail down what it means to be a modern transformational school head. It's all about mastering the foundation, so let's get into it. Here's how we're going to tackle this today. We've got 5 interconnected parts: defining the modern school head, mapping out the 7 leadership domains, understanding the learner's context, tracing how instructional leadership has evolved, and finally, integrating all of this into your daily transformational leadership.
All right, starting with part 1, defining the modern school head.
First things first, we've got to ground ourselves. We always operate within the mandate and vision of the Department of Education. In the day-to-day chaos of running a school, dealing with emergency budget cuts, schedule conflicts, the roof leaking, it is just so incredibly easy to lose sight of this big picture. But literally every strategy, every policy, every late night you spend planning, it all fundamentally ties back to this institutional framework. We do not operate in a vacuum. Realigning with this exact macro-level mandate, that's absolutely crucial. It's step 1 for transformational leadership. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of daily operations, you really have to master these 3 foundational roles: being an instructional leader, an organizational leader, and an exemplar. And listen, these aren't just different hats you swap out, they are deeply interconnected. Think about it. You just can't be a successful organizational leader orchestrating all those moving parts if you aren't first acting as an exemplar. Setting that ethical and moral tone for your community, that's what actually earns you the trust to manage the whole shebang. And once you have that trust, then you can fully step into your role as an instructional leader, making educational quality your absolute top priority. Okay, moving on to part 2, the 7 domains of leadership. Let's put some structure to the chaos. Imagine a school with just immense potential. You've got talented staff, eager kids, decent resources, but without a unifying structure, all that energy is just scattered. That's what we see here. The unstructured potential of a school operating without a cohesive strategy. It's like a blank framework. It's just sitting there, waiting for a transformational leader, waiting for you to step in, take those raw materials, and intentionally connect them to build something way greater than the sum of its parts. Boom, and here is the complete picture. These are the 7 interconnected domains of the National Competency-Based Standards for School Heads, fitting together like a perfect puzzle to give you that much-needed structure. This is essentially your visual roadmap. It covers everything, the peripheral stuff like HR and parent involvement, right down to the daily bell schedule. And notice how it wraps completely around a central core principle? It gives you a definitive, reliable guide to managing the massive scope of your job. Let's zoom in and see how this builds, starting with this critical keystone piece, Domain 1, School Leadership. This piece literally sets the direction for absolutely everything else that follows. Now, this domain is definitely not just about sitting in an office giving orders. It's heavily focused on data-based strategic planning, problem-solving, and building high-performance teams to navigate change. So what does that look like on a Tuesday morning? It means digging deep into last year's reading scores, or analyzing chronic absenteeism data before you even think about where to put your budget. Your job is to develop and communicate the vision of the school so clearly that every single team member is rowing in the exact same direction, driven by hard evidence, not just gut feelings. Next up, we add the beating heart of our daily operations, instructional leadership. Look, without a relentless focus right here, the school just fundamentally cannot do its main job of educating kids. The real game changer here is keeping a laser focus on assessment for learning, developing robust instructional programs, and active instructional supervision. Assessment for learning is massive. It's what tells us how to pivot our teaching day by day. And please note the word active in active supervision. That does not mean sitting passively in the back of a classroom with a clipboard twice a year. No way. It means being right there in the trenches with your teachers. It's also about realizing that adapting proven, existing programs is often way better than tossing everything out and starting from scratch. You are optimizing the learning happening inside the building, not just managing the bricks and mortar. But, none of those previous steps really matter if we don't lock in Domain 3, creating a student-centered learning climate. This means setting exceptionally high academic expectations, for sure, but doing it while cultivating an environment entirely focused on the specific, holistic needs of the learner. It's about setting clear social expectations that naturally foster growth and safety. And hey, when we say safety, we aren't just talking about locked doors and fire drills. We mean psychological safety. A truly student-centered climate is one where students feel safe enough to fail, to ask the really difficult questions, and to learn from their mistakes without being ridiculed. That is where the magic, the deep learning, actually happens. Which perfectly brings us to part 3, understanding the learner's context. Who exactly are we serving? When we take a second to look at the incredibly diverse realities walking through your school gates every single morning, the sheer complexity of what you manage is staggering. Every single student brings their own unique baggage, challenges, and advantages into that classroom. I mean, just look at this. From mastering K-12 pedagogies to navigating specialized inclusion programs, your plate is totally full. Take the Alternative Learning System, or ALS, for example. That requires a completely different approach to engage kids outside the traditional classroom setup. Then think about the huge effort required for indigenization, making sure the curriculum isn't just factually accurate, but deeply culturally relevant to the indigenous learners in your specific area. You're constantly walking a tightrope between overarching curriculum standards and the immediate hyper-specific need to define what learner-centered actually looks like for your exact community. So with all that context in mind, let's look at part 4, the evolving instructional leader, and how this job has shifted over time. Because the way we lead today, it is definitely not the way we led 30 years ago. Back in 1989, Flath defined the instructional leader as someone who allocates resources, manages the curriculum, and monitors lesson plans. Very top-down, very administrative. And honestly, it made sense for that era. We were still heavily reliant on an industrial model of schooling, where the principal was basically a manager, evaluating teachers from afar and checking boxes for compliance. But fast forward to today and look at this sharp contrast. According to Dufour's updated definitions, we are no longer just administrative bosses. We are learning leaders. We don't just monitor compliance anymore. We solicit opinions, we champion deep collaboration, and we actually model effective instruction ourselves. Think about what a game changer that is for a teacher. Instead of a boss who just fills out an annual review form, they get a leader who gives nuanced feedback, offers real suggestions, and provides targeted professional development. We've completely evolved from managers of a process to collaborative leaders of a living, breathing learning community. All right, let's bring it all home with part 5, integrating transformational leadership. This brings us to the ultimate, absolute core principle of the School Head Framework. You are accountable for providing access to quality education through high professionalism and transformational leadership. And let's be clear, transformational leadership is not just some trendy educational buzzword. It's an active, daily commitment to changing student outcomes no matter what their starting context is. It requires you to be fiercely competent, deeply committed, and highly accountable. When all 7 of those domains we just talked about are clicking together, this is the result: a school that genuinely transforms lives. So you now have the framework, the history, and a real grasp on the immense scope of modern educational leadership. I want to leave you with this final challenge. Pull out your project concept note right now. When you view your local challenges through the lens of these 7 interconnected domains, how does it change your perspective? Apply this integrated puzzle to your specific school, find out exactly which piece is missing, and step fully into your role as a transformational learning leader. How will you reshape your school's future today?